Hello YouTube, this is Morgan, Airspeed Prime here with my next Sword Art Online Alternative Gale Online episode review. This one's going to be for episode 3, which is called Fan Letter. And yeah, another good episode of GGO. With this one, I still, I think, have some slight issues with the way they did the first episode in terms of, I suppose, how long they kind of kept in with the this happens in the future scene, getting a good bit into the squad jam. And because of that, it made this episode feel a little bit redundant in a way, because from the context of just seeing some of the action stuff take place at the start of the first episode, it made the explanation of what the squad jam is, the kind of basic ideas of strategy and stuff like that, the little mysteries that they set up within this episode that are already basically answered because of the first episode, that oh, the strategy is that they use her as a decoy basically, and because she's so fast it makes sense to use her as the leader, because then they can have M, who's the strongest member of their team, just pick off people from a distance. That strategy is already revealed because of the first episode, and it's purely because the first episode showed so much of the squad jam, whereas in the manga all they show of the squad jam before they jump into the backstory on Karen is a couple of panels of her jumping out of the suitcase and taking people out, and at that point you don't actually know who the enemies are that she's taking out, just that she's actually taking out people. So now I'm kind of questioning, did they just skip basically onto the after events of where we left off with the first episode, or are we really starting the full squad jam again and kind of going a little bit more kind of in depth on that? That's where I'm not sure, and why I felt the first episode was a bit weird. As I said, I understand why they did it, because they wanted to jump in with a good bit of action before just having a lot of character stuff take place. But I think going so far back as to heavily explain the squad jam in this episode, it was fun and there was a lot of nice character moments. Len and Pito Hui's conversation about the squad jam initially. We got to see, of course, the meeting of M and Len and how their kind of team forms. That stuff is interesting, but the basics of kind of going over the rules more or less twice about what the squad jam is, where you already have to assume that everyone has watched the GGO arc of SAO, so they know how a bullet tournament works. The only real extra rule to apply was that the bodies stay on the field, and the leader's the only one who gets picked up by the satellite scan. Otherwise, it's just okay, this is all fairly standard stuff. But I think the main thing in this episode was the fan letter and what some of the rest of the episode kind of hinted at about the identity of certain characters. And I think the theory that's really growing, I think, is that Pito Hui is this singer, what is it, Elsa Kanzaki, I think it is, or something like that. That she is that singer because, very specifically, she's not available to play the game on the day that this concert is on. Karen wanted to go to this concert with her friend, but they couldn't get tickets, and so that's why Karen is participating in this tournament. And then, obviously, the fan letter itself, being Karen sending it to Elsa, and talking about not just how much she likes her music and how it inspires her, but going full on into what we've learned about her character, her height complex, going as far as to say she joined GGO, to play as a different type of character, and revealing basically that her character is this cute short girl who wears all pink, which, if anyone had known Len from the game and they read that letter, they'd instantly know that, oh, this Karen person is Len in real life. So if it is Elsa, is Pito Hui, then that means that side of the kind of I suppose mystery between them and their friendship of them knowing who each other is in the real world has more or less been resolved on one side but not on the other. And whether or not that actually is a factor, of course, because it's a fan letter, do they actually get to the celebrity or what? And then it also, if it is the case that Peter Wee is the singer, then what does that make, like, M? Like, because Peter Wee knows M, and she kind of talks about him like he's a criminal, which I think the initial theory would be either that M is somehow like her manager, or probably more likely like her like head of security or something like that. But then if she's missing the tournament because she's in a concert, shouldn't he be there if that's his role? So it obviously there's some complex details that mean like I don't think we can really figure the full thing out right now with the information that we have. But that in itself is quite interesting, because being presented that like, oh yeah, he's not a very nice guy, he's more or less a criminal, but not really. And then the way, especially when he talks to Len about how to use the knife, it's really like, whoa, you must know what you're doing in real life, because obviously in the game, like the idea of like cutting in the throat, like the arteries, the specific parts of the body is like, okay, you're talking about this as if you know how to do it in real life, versus just saying that like they take more hit points if you hit them on this part of the body or something like that. So either he knows that addressing it in a real life setting, it applies to the game because the game is modeled very well, or he's just going like, okay, this is how you actually use a knife in real life, so it applies just as well here, especially you because you've got high agility, which makes me really excited to see if we get to see Len use the knife a bit more in like a confined environment, and just see how far she's willing to go with it, because just that scene, it makes it feel so up close and personal, and she already seems to have just a little bit of an issue with the idea of like the player killing stuff. And like, it's one thing with the guns where you're doing it from range, or her like somewhat up close, but it's another thing to get so up close and like stab someone with the knife, and especially him telling her to like stab them like in the sides of the leg, and especially like stab them in the eye to like hurt their brain. It's pretty crazy, but it's I think it's absolutely suggesting that M has some sort of like military special agent, something like that training. He knows how to use guns and fight in real life, and that applies to him in the game very well. Yeah, the other thing there, I think we got a minor reference to potentially Xenon and just the bullet-to-bullet tournaments that we saw in the SAO arc, of like Peter Wee saying that she was eliminated very early on in that by a sniper who, obviously Xenon's not the only sniper, but it could have been something that Xenon did. And then she watched the rest of the tournament and noticed that two of the players worked together in it, and it was so nice. So I think that's clearly suggesting it was Kirito and Xenon. But that's really all there is there. We saw the scene of M training Len, I suppose, to get an idea of what her skill level is at. We didn't really see him acknowledge necessarily how good he felt she was, but clearly from what we saw in episode 1, he knows where he can kind of use her and so on. We got an idea of his weaponry, that he uses a sort of mid-range kind of enhanced battle rifle. Then he uses a handgun up close, and he has the knife as well. And then he has a huge backpack that they sort of leave as a little bit of a mystery, that like, what exactly is he going to use out of that big backpack that's going to come in handy for them? So that's probably something that will come into play. And I think to a degree, just where they leave it off with us kind of finally going into the Squad Jam tournament, is that I think it more or less confirms to us that, okay, the arc of this is actually going to be this bullet tournaments, and that just the way the first episode did things, I was almost like, wait, did she win this bullet tournaments? Because it specifically showed her taking down the group of the combat veterans, and then it cuts out to her in real life with the girls who were sort of noting how tall she is, now over at her house kind of praising her as if the Squad Jam was over. So I'm still a little unsure on like, okay, I assume we're going to actually see the end of the Squad Jam, because I think where we left it in episode 1, there was still like about 6 or 7 teams left, and I assume we'll cover how exactly that happens. In that, of course, the whole series isn't just going to be, I think, about this one Squad Jam, in that I think Pito Hui otherwise isn't really involved in the show that much. So I think this squad jam has to end fairly shortly, and they probably get into a second squad jam, where we maybe have a more fleshed out team. Pito Hui can maybe participate, which obviously the question then is, when do they do the real life, I suppose, meetup of some of these characters? Is it in between tournaments, or is that right at the end of the series? I'm not sure, but there's enough mysteries going on here that I'm intrigued to see where they go with things, how they go about doing the reveals, even just what the core of most of these episodes is going to be about. Is it this first squad jam, or is there a second tournament that they sort of get into by maybe placing well or winning this tournament, which they more or less seem to imply. But yeah, solid episode 3. With episode 4, I hope they don't repeat too much of what they've already covered in episode 1, but we'll see how they go. But yeah, that's been the episode review for episode 3. In the comments, let me know what your thoughts were on this episode. But yeah, that's been the video. Thanks for watching, and bye.